Alrighty, guys, so we've already done our non-spoiler review for Thunderbolts. That was the previous segment, but let's get into all of those juicy spoilers for this MCU film. Of course, with every MCU film, there are going to be spoilers, so let's dive into it. And I'm very excited because I usually, like I said, I don't usually get to own separate segments for spoiler discussions and spoiler reviews. So this is different. This is exciting, and I can't wait to dive in. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Thunderbolts, guys. Thunderbolts. Full spoiler warning. Here we go. Like I said, the first act of the film, I said this in my non-spoiler review, was a little bit slow. And I don't think slow is a bad thing because nothing in the first act inherently was bad to me. I enjoyed very much seeing the characters interact with one another. In fact, one of the best things that they did in the first act was set up that relationship between Yelena and Bob. And from the beginning, I really liked the relationship. It was a very tender and soft relationship that I think translated super well to the ending, which we'll talk about towards the latter half of this spoiler review. But I really enjoyed that because I thought, again, it's just setting up the dynamics between these characters, John Walker, Ghost, and Taskmaster. We'll talk about Taskmaster in just a second. Ghost, I don't think she really had a whole lot to do. Like I said, David Harbour had some great scenes with Yelena and Florence Pugh. But he was mostly the comic relief. I think Bucky was interesting. He had a couple moments, like he had that moment where he was talking to the Thunderbolts at the gas station, I think, or wherever they were, and he was like, "Yep, you have the one chance to make something of your lives." And I think that came very clearly. It shot clearly through to the Thunderbolts because of who Bucky was and what he had gone through and what he has been through. And so I think that is all really interesting and super well done. That's great. But again, I don't think he himself had a whole lot to do either. And maybe that's a little disappointing. But it really was about Bob and Yelena and Red Guardian in general. So I really, again, the first, I would say, hour of the movie, I was like, yeah, it's good. I was almost a little disappointed by the time we reached the halfway point. By the time the Thunderbolts reached the Watchtower, I guess it's called now, because I was like, oh well. And I was so excited about the movie that I was like, is this it? Like, is it just going to be a kind of decent MCU movie? Because if it is, I mean, that's fine. But, I'd hope for a little bit more. But then we reach the third act. Because like I said, the second act to me really was the victim of all this. If the first act, the way that it was paced and the way that it was going, was setting up a very similarly paced second and third act, this movie would have been 3 hours long. And it didn't need to be 3 hours long. So the second act, I think, really suffered for it because it was really the second act. What that was, it was beginning at the Watchtower and ending with Yelena entering the Void. That was like 30 minutes. And it was just one fight between the Thunderbolts and Sentry, which was awesome, by the way. I was truly terrified of how you see, because we've seen, for those of you who have seen The Boys, and not everyone, should see The Boys because it's a very, very graphic depiction of superheroes and supervillains. But, Homelander is a very specific kind of evil Superman. Evil Superman is a concept that's been done before. This character is not evil Superman. It's more just what happens when normal or even super soldiers, but heroes go up against an unstoppable force. And that was scary. Like, I think I'm really curious to see where Sentry, how he's going to play into Avengers Doomsday. We know he's going to show up there because that scene where they're fighting him, I was on the edge of my seat. I was like, wow, it was really effectively done, the way that he was handling the Thunderbolts there. And I think that was great. But again, the second act really was more like 20, 30 minutes of the movie. The third act, though. Let's talk about the third act. I read somewhere a while ago that Jake Schreier, the director of the movie, compared the film to Toy Story 3. In the sense, he was like, I wanted to evoke that sense of the furnace scene in Toy Story 3. And at the time, I kind of dismissed it, and I was like, yeah, whatever. Maybe he's evoking kind of the misfit toys sort of aspect of the film. But after having seen the last 30 to 45 minutes of Thunderbolts, I get it. I mean, the whole scene where they're going through their own trauma, where Yelena's going through her trauma, and then she's talking to Bob. And Bob, Louis Pullman is, I know they were originally going to cast Steven Yeun, and Steven Yeun's a good actor. The hurt and the gentleness and kindness, but also the utter pain and distraught that is in Louis Pullman's face as he acts his way through this movie is unbelievably good. And the third act cements it for me. as we're watching horrific things happen to a young Bob Reynolds, and understanding this character and the darkness and the void and the idea and the real struggles of mental health and depression and struggle that this man has gone through to get to this point where he really believes, and this is dark, but this is what the movie is dealing with, that nothing matters. And, you get to that final scene where he's fighting the void, right? It's Bob. It's not even Sentry. It's Bob against the void. And he's punching and he's trying to kill the void, and you realize that is exactly what the void wants. And I really, as I think about it, I get a little emotional. The scene where Yelena grabs Bob, and it's not just a whole, get off of him, and you're better than that. I forget exactly what she says. I think she says something like, "I'm here. You're not alone." And that hit so hard for me. And I am just so amazed that this is what I walk out of Thunderbolts with, is not, oh, what a great action movie, or what a funny movie in the MCU. I walk out of this movie with that line, "You're not alone." And that's beautiful. It is beautiful, and it is wonderful. And I'm so glad that a movie in the MCU deals with those kinds of things in that way. I really am. Like I said, it's not a perfect movie. It isn't, because I think the first chunk of the movie was not paced as well as it could have been to get to the third act. But when you get to that third act, it all comes together in a way where you don't just punch and kick your way out of this. I think Yelena says that earlier on in the movie, like, what? We just punch and kick and shoot, and we need someone to fly, to get out of this. But no. I mean, just like they needed each other to get out of the depression that they were all in. And I think that is such a beautiful thing for this movie. I can't believe it. I'm just not that I can't believe it, but I couldn't believe how emotionally resonant. That's what I meant to say. Emotionally resonant the end of this movie was, and I really am glad. Now, of course, it's an MCU movie, so let's talk about the very end of the movie, right? We'll talk about the post-credit scenes in a separate segment, but Val is like, "Oh no, I don't want to talk to you guys," and then they go into the tent, and lo and behold, the press is there, and Val says, "And here are your new Avengers." And okay, there goes all of my asterisk theories. I thought Dark Avengers made a little more sense to me. I think Dark Avengers was more of what they were at the beginning, because I think the reasoning was fair, right? I think the reasoning that I gave for Dark Avengers in that separate segment that I did a while ago was that, it's more like a Black Ops team of Avengers. And now, I think that's what they were in essence at the beginning. But I think that the asterisk is then now referring to really the fact that these are, Val is trying to position them as actually the Avengers. And she really is now anti-Nick Fury. Where people think Nick Fury actually is, I have no idea. He's in space somewhere doing something. Who knows what? Who knows if he's going to show up in Avengers Doomsday? I have no idea. But I think that, and again, we're going to talk about the post-credit scenes. It sets up a very interesting conflict between these new Avengers and the actual Avengers, quote-unquote real Avengers, and then Fantastic Four and X-Men and Wakandans. So it's going to be very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. But yeah, I enjoyed the reveal. I think that it made a decent bit of sense there as well. Before we close out the spoiler review, I just wanted to touch base with my hopes and predictions, because I think it's always fun to do. Especially because I want to make fun of the fact that I got a lot of things wrong. So my hopes, right? These three things I said were, if these three things came true, then the film had a much higher chance of being successful, in my personal opinion. And my predictions were just predictions, right? Bold predictions, but predictions nonetheless. So 3 hopes. Number 1, that the film would be something more than fun. This movie definitely, one of the most emotionally resonant movies in the MCU. So yeah, definitely. Number 2, genuine surprises. I think I was thinking more in line of, just big pop moments or things that we haven't seen in the trailers. Because honestly, maybe one of the things that made the first act drag a little bit was just because we'd seen almost all of it in the trailers. And maybe that's why. And again, I don't blame them for hiding a lot of the third act. But, I think we saw a lot of the first act in the trailer. But the third act was a genuine surprise to me. And I think that it was great. It was awesome. And number 3, this becomes a team to root for. I don't know if I'm rooting for the team necessarily, because they're kind of morally gray. But in terms of what I actually meant by this, this is a team that I look forward to seeing again. Absolutely. Those 3 things knocked it out of the park. Predictions. The answer to the asterisk mystery is either silly, obvious, or both. Not silly at all. I think it makes total sense. Obvious? Yeah. I think kind of obvious. I think we all thought it was some kind of variation on some kind of Avengers team. So yeah, I don't think it was. Like, I thought about this on my way back from the theater. Why would they do this? Why would they put this in the marketing? It's sort of a gimmick. Yeah, it's a gimmick. Did they need to do it? No, they didn't. Because, Falcon and the Winter Soldier could have also had an asterisk, and then they changed it to Captain America and the Winter Soldier. They could have also had an asterisk. It's a little gimmicky, but it got people talking, I guess. And in that one sense, I suppose no press is bad press. So whatever, that's fine. Second prediction, I got very wrong. Taskmaster dies in the first few minutes. Yeah, in the first 15 minutes. But her death is pivotal to the whole story. No, absolutely not. She's done. Like, they talk about it once later on, and she's done. Interestingly, they, give her and Ghost almost zero backstory. Olga Kurylenko, who plays Taskmaster, shows up for literally 3 seconds in the movie, I would say. And then she's gone. So that kind of sucks for her. She was at the premiere, and yeah, that kind of sucks for her. And number 3, Robert Downey Jr. cameos in the post-credit scene. Very close. I get very close. We'll talk about this more in the next segment, but no, he does not. The Fantastic Four instead take his place. So guys, those were my spoiler thoughts on Thunderbolts. I, again, really enjoyed the movie, and I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say about the film in the comments down below.